Yo, YouTube, what's up with your boy, Sports and Fitness Rant? I'm back, guys. Click that like button. Subscribe to my channel. What's up, y'all? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Got another great video for you guys today. As usual, you guys know the deal on this channel. It's all about setting the record straight, stopping the lies, stopping the narratives, stopping them from rewriting the history, guys, and bending reality. And in this video, I want to kind of do a continuation off of the video that I did earlier, talking about, when Michael Jordan was, being called the GOAT, how he was being called the greatest of all time before he had won anything. And people try to use that to knock the Michael Jordan fans and to try to twist these debates up. But I wanted to do a continuation off that and really, let's talk about who was the definitive GOAT before Michael Jordan, or if there was a definitive GOAT before Michael Jordan, right? Was there a guy in the NBA's history that was hands down, right, the greatest basketball player of all time before Michael Jordan? Was there anybody that you can say with certainty that like Michael Jordan is today? I don't think there was. We're going to talk about in this video, guys. And I want to thank you guys, of course, man, everyone across the world, everyone across the states has been supporting my channel, guys. Once again, I am truly humbled by all the support. You guys know the deal, man. It really means a lot, guys, for real. You guys commenting, liking my videos, subscribing, sharing it, man, whatever it is. It means a lot. You guys donating to my channel. Shout out to everybody in the membership. Like I said, guys, it's truly, truly humbling, man. You guys emailing me, you guys hitting me up with the messages on Instagram and stuff and sharing some of this stuff with me, guys. For real, man, it means a lot. So much respect to all you guys out there, the true basketball fans that are standing up. And you guys know what to do. Turn the volume all the way up. Hit that play button. Remember, these videos are for educational purposes. And let's roll. So, yes, guys, like I said, man, I want to do a continuation off of, or a spin-off, I guess, off the video I did earlier when I was talking about how people were, talking about Michael Jordan being given the greatest of all time label by some, even though he had never won anything, and people trying to use that as a knock against Michael Jordan in these debates now, right? They try to change the standard and make it seem as if, we're being hypocritical now and talking about like it's just about championships and, oh, Michael Jordan was being called the greatest of all time before he even won, and now you're saying that this guy has to win X amount of championships and blah, 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 blah. They don't get it, man, and we talked about in the video. But to take it a step further, like I said, from what we were talking about in that video, was the question I was thinking, who was a definitive GOAT, or was there actually a definitive greatest of all time, right? A majority decision, greatest of all time, from the people out there in society, guys, in society. Remember, we live in a society, guys, right? And in society now, Michael Jordan is regarded by most people. I'm not saying everybody, but most people regard Michael Jordan as the greatest of all time, right? And people can say whatever they want for the reasons behind that. You hear people say about, oh, it's just popularity. Michael Jordan's just popular. That's why. It doesn't make any sense. How is Michael Jordan still this popular, even the man ain't dribbled the basketball in over 20 seasons, guys? The reason why he's still this popular, why he's considered the greatest of all time by most people, is because of his legacy that he left, the greatness, and all the things he accomplished, the way that he accomplished them, right? In the video footage. It keeps Michael Jordan relevant in these conversations. But when we talk about Michael Jordan, let's think about who, or if anybody, was the definitive greatest of all time, like the way that Michael Jordan is perceived now. Was there anybody like this before Michael Jordan? Because I don't believe that there was. Now, we can go back in the history of the game and say that maybe George Mikan, who was like the first great player of the NBA's history, maybe we can say that he was the definitive greatest basketball player of all time when he was alive. We can go back and say, hey, maybe Bill Russell was the definitive greatest player of all time when he played. Maybe it was Bob Pettit. Maybe it was Wilt Chamberlain when he played. People said it was the greatest of all time. Then maybe it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Right? Maybe some people said it was Oscar Robertson. Some people said it was Jerry West, maybe. And then maybe you had some people that said it was Dr. J. Maybe it was Moses Malone. Maybe it was Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. And then you had someone like a Michael Jordan come along. But were any of those players before Michael Jordan, that was now, like I said, after Michael Jordan's totality of his career, being labeled as the greatest of all time, was there anyone else that you can think of before Michael Jordan that was, like I said, like anyone who really thought that they were the greatest of all time as a majority, the way that Michael Jordan is viewed? Because oftentimes you'll hear people say, oh, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the greatest of all time before Michael Jordan was being labeled as the greatest of all time, right? And they try to take away from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and say, oh, well, Michael Jordan was being called the greatest of all time, and he had never won anything, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had 6 championships and all this stuff. and they were calling Michael Jordan the greatest of all time. So, yeah, we can say that maybe Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was regarded as the greatest of all time before Michael Jordan, but did he have a stranglehold on that title like Michael Jordan does now? Was it a definitive title? Because really, there's no one to dispute Michael Jordan. Now, we can go back and forth once again, whether Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time or not, or if there's a greatest of all time in basketball. Some people do not believe you can have a greatest of all time in a team sport. I get all of that. But in society, we have these debates and we have these conversations, and you could damn sure have a greatest of all time in basketball. Basketball is one of the few team sports, right? When you compare to other team sports, you have the least amount of people in the player field or the field of play, right? And one superstar player on a team or basketball team can impact a game, right? The outcome of a game more so than one football player on a team, more so than one baseball player, more so than one hockey player or one soccer player. I mean, maybe baseball, you could talk about a pitcher having a lot of control over a game. So maybe baseball's not a great example. But once again, the pitcher's only as great, right, as the help behind him. So if the pitcher's throwing good pitches and guys are hitting balls, you still need the guys behind you to field, right? In football, the quarterback could be amazing, but you don't have a running back. You have no offensive line, right? Your defense stinks, so you can score 40 points, but your defense gives up 48, right? Maybe you don't have a kicker. Maybe your special teams is pathetic. Whatever the case may be, there's a billion coaches out there. Everyone needs to be doing their job in the NFL. Look at the size of a soccer field. How many people are on the field to play in soccer? One person can't impact the game as much as one basketball player can in a basketball game. So when we talk about Michael Jordan, he's recognized as the greatest basketball player of all time, and we talk about, the fans and barbershop talk and conversations and debates, and we talk about how fun this stuff is to go back and forth, you can absolutely have a greatest of all time in basketball. It does not take away from the game, the sport. It does not take away from other players. Once again, if we're being honest and we're giving the actual facts, we're being educational about these things, and we're being truthful. We're not being disingenuous. We're not tearing down player A to lift up player B. We're having a legit debate. You can absolutely do these things, like I said, and hold the integrity of the game and not disrespect players. But to me, it was Michael Jordan more so than any other player that's come along since Michael Jordan or before Michael Jordan that had such a stranglehold on the title of greatest of all time. Like I said, when I was growing up, guys, some people may have said it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but there were a lot of people that still said it was Bill Russell. There were many people that still said it was Wilt Chamberlain. I told you guys, anytime that I remember watching basketball growing up and there was some kind of record that was broken, or Michael Jordan set some record, or he did XYZ, such and such, oftentimes these things had asterisks attached to them. There was an asterisk there because of Wilt Chamberlain, and the numbers that he put up offensively were untouchable. So oftentimes there was an asterisk there, and it would say, since the ABA-NBA merger. This is how they qualified a lot of these stats, even to this day. They'll qualify a lot of this stuff by saying over the last 20 years. So you exclude guys like Michael Jordan, the Wilt Chamberlains. You exclude some of these guys when they put some of these stats out, these quote-unquote stats now. They're not real stats. They're not real records. They put them out there, but they omit and exclude certain individuals by highlighting or saying that it was over the last 20 years. And that's what it was for Wilt Chamberlain when I was growing up. A lot of these records that Wilt Chamberlain had, they had to qualify by saying an asterisk on this stuff. That's how great Wilt Chamberlain was. Once again, some people would say it was Jerry West. I remember people talking about Jerry West. I remember people talking about Oscar Robertson, saying Oscar Robertson was one of the greatest players of all time. Some people thought he was the greatest player of all time back in the 80s, back in the 90s. That's the way it was. Like I said, Dr. J, even to this day, there are people who believe that Dr. J is the greatest player of all time. I got Dr. J in my top 10. Not many people even have Dr. J in the top 10. But when I was growing up, he was absolutely a top 5, top 10 player. Right? And he was, like I said, some people think he was the greatest player of all time. Yes, you had the Kareem Abdul-Jabbars. Some people think it was Magic Johnson. Some people think it's Larry Bird. This is how it was. It was more so that way back in the 80s, the 70s, the 90s, right? Even the early 2000s, more so than it is today for Michael Jordan. It always seemed to be Michael Jordan and everyone else since Michael Jordan retired after the 1998 season and really solidified himself as the greatest basketball player of all time, completing his second three-peat and essentially being forced to retire after winning his 5th MVP. People will talk about the MVP awards and they'll say something like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has 6 MVPs. And we must remember, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar won these MVPs when the players voted. He won most of his MVPs, if not all of them. I believe every one of them except for one, while the players voted. I believe, I could be wrong about that, but I know all of them, maybe even all of them except for one. He got when the players voted. So once again, are we going to sit here and believe that if Michael Jordan, it played in the 90s, and the players were allowed to vote on MVP still in the 90s, do you guys believe that anyone would have won an MVP with Michael Jordan in the 90s? He would have won easily in 91, 92 like he did. He probably would have won in 1990. Probably would have won in 1993, not Charles Barkley. Probably would have won again in 1997, not Karl Malone. He would have had all those MVPs if the players voted on it. He would probably have a lot more MVPs. Who knows? Maybe he would have won in 89. You don't know these things. So we talk about MVP awards. We have to remember those things for Michael Jordan and not forget that Michael Jordan was forced into retirement after the 1998 season, coming off of his 5th MVP. So could Michael Jordan have came back in 1999 with the Chicago Bulls and won another MVP in a lockout-shortened 50-game season? We don't know. Maybe, possibly. It's not important, though. But these are the facts. This is the context behind a lot of these things. So we talk about who was a definitive GOAT before Michael Jordan. I don't really believe anyone had the stranglehold on that title the way that Michael Jordan does before Michael Jordan. I don't think anyone had it. Like I said, you could say it was Dr. J. You could say it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But some people argue Bill Russell. To this day, there are a lot of people who still have Bill Russell above Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They have Will Chamberlain above Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. There are people that have Hakeem Olajuwon above Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the greatest of all time on a top 10 list or a top 5 list, whatever the case may be. So what that shows you is that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did not have the stranglehold on the greatest of all time title like a lot of people want you to believe. Was he considered the greatest of all time by many people? Absolutely. Many people consider Kareem Abdul-Jabbar the greatest of all time before Michael Jordan took that title. But it wasn't the way it is now as far as if you did a vote, it's going to be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in a runaway, in a landslide. It wouldn't have been that way. Like I said, this is when I was growing up, guys, where I was in my circles. And maybe where you were, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the runaway greatest of all time. Maybe no one brought up Bill Russell or Will Chamberlain or Jerry West or Oscar Robertson or George Mikan or a Bob Pettit, right? Or a Dr. J. Maybe no one brought these guys up. Maybe no one brought up a Magic Johnson or a Larry Bird in those conversations, a Moses Malone arguably for one of the greatest players of all time. But I'm telling you right now, when I was growing up in New York City, man, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is from New York City, but yet and still people would understand, and like I said, they would mention these other players. Other people voted for these guys as the greatest of all times. As far as Michael Jordan's concerned, and since he's been recognized universally, like I said, since the late 90s, universally as the greatest player of all time, guys, no one's really, to me, had that kind of stranglehold on that title since Michael Jordan or before Michael Jordan. No one has. Anyone that's came after Michael Jordan is being compared to Michael Jordan. The Kobe Bryants, Tim Duncan, right? All these great players, LeBron James, all these great players, they're compared to Michael Jordan, right? If you want to be the greatest of all time, you have to go through Michael Jordan. He's the one. He's the bar. He's the one right there that everyone's chasing. When they talk about who's the next Michael Jordan, this is what it's about. The NBA still searching for the next Michael Jordan. They're not looking for the next Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or the next Bill Russell. The next Will Chamberlain. No, they're looking for the next Michael Jordan. Not the next LeBron James. None of these guys. And they're all great players in their own rights. But it's Michael Jordan who the NBA is still searching for since he's left. It was Michael Jordan who took the game global. It was Michael Jordan who played in the most popular era in NBA's history. And he was the most popular player of that era. With many great players. The golden era of the NBA's history, guys. The golden age. Michael Jordan. You guys understand this. There's no one been like that before or after. Bill Russell, like I said, who was recognized as the greatest player for many, many years. For many, even to this day, you could say, people will argue that Bill Russell is the greatest of all time. But as the years went on, people would argue it was Will Chamberlain over Bill Russell. That was always a heated debate. Will Chamberlain or Bill Russell, right? And then, like I said, a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. These are the guys that were being thrown around these conversations. But you would also have people bring up the Oscar Robertsons, the Jerry Wests, the Dr. J's, the Moses Malones, the George Mikans, some of these great pioneers, some of these great players from back in the day. They would bring up some of these players as guys who have arguments for the greatest player of all time or the top 5 to 10 players in the history of the game before Michael Jordan. These are the names being thrown out there. And then, like I said, as the 80s progressed into the late 80s, all of a sudden now you had guys like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson's name being brought up in the greatest players in NBA's history. It wasn't just Bill Russell. It wasn't just Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Because one thing that we must remember, even if people want to say that Bill Russell was being regarded widely by most people as the greatest basketball player of all time during the 60s, if they want to make that argument, that's great. But we must remember and keep a few things in mind here. When I'm talking about Michael Jordan having the stranglehold over the greatest of all time title, more so than any other player in the history of the game, we must understand something. Michael Jordan played in the 90s. He became the greatest of all time in the late 90s, guys. That's when he was really given that title by the people. Remember, the people have to give you that title. He was given that title in the late 90s by the people. At that point, the NBA had been in existence for over 50 years. Remember the 50th anniversary, guys, right? So the NBA had been around for over 50 years at that point, guys. So you have a 50-year history to judge and compare players. So for Michael Jordan to have the stranglehold over the NBA the way he has as the greatest of all time at that point, throughout the NBA's history at that point, is more impressive than Bill Russell being regarded as the greatest of all time by most people in the 60s, let's say, when the NBA had only been around for, let's say, half the time. Not as long, right? So you don't have the history of great players to be compared to. Right, you have the George Mikan's, the Bob Pettits, and then you have a Bill Russell, and then a Will Chamberlain, and all the great players that came in the 60s, right? The Willis Reeds, like I mentioned, the Walt Bellamy's, the Bob Cousy that you had in the 50s into the 60s, right? You had the John Havliceks that came in. Like I said, you had the Jerry West, the Oscar Robertsons that came in, right? You had some of these players that came in the 60s, right, that go into the 70s. And then, like I said, you had a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. These are the guys that are regarded as the greatest players of all time. These names came up all the time. Now, all these years later, now they try to act and tell you those guys are not great. They're not top 10 players. They're not even top 20. They're nothing, those guys. They're plumbers and taxi cab drivers. No one brings up Jerry West. No one brings up Oscar Robertson. No one talks about any of these guys anymore. No one talks about Dr. J in the top 10 conversation. I bring up Dr. J's name. People laugh at me. Oh, this guy's got Dr. J top 10. What is he? Who the hell is Dr. J? What does he think? Dr. J was this. Dr. J couldn't do that. These guys think that Dr. J was just out there slam dunking the basketball. That's not the case. The man played defense. One of the greatest shot-blocking small forwards in the history of the game. He was a really good rebounder at that position. And the man could score in a myriad of different ways. He had the intangibles. He played with the love of the game, man. He had swag. He was an icon, Dr. J. Once again, a pioneer. Someone who paved the way for someone like a Michael Jordan to come along. They don't talk about Elgin Baylor anymore. No one wants to bring up Elgin Baylor, the guy who inspired Dr. J. No, they don't want to talk about these guys. They're garbage now. They didn't do anything. These are the guys that you would hear brought up throughout the NBA's history. These are the players. Even to this day, you have people who think Magic Johnson's the greatest of all time. People who think that Larry Bird's the greatest of all time. But most people say Michael Jordan. So for me, was there a definitive greatest of all time before Michael Jordan or like that? Like I said, as dominative in these conversations as a Michael Jordan, a stranglehold on these conversations like a Michael Jordan. I do not believe anyone was like that. Like I said, and if you want to talk about a Bill Russell or a Will Chamberlain or a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it wasn't quite like a Michael Jordan, guys. Remember, Michael Jordan changed the game. There's no guard that's been regarded this way. No one. Remember, guys, if you took 1 million votes from 1 million people, 1 million people voted, and you put out 10 names, greatest players of all time, you wrote 10 names out, right? 10 names out. Michael Jordan's going to get a large majority of the votes, guys. It's just the way it is. And then it'll be trickled and spread out through other various players. That's the way it's been. It's been like that for years. It'll always be like that. No matter how much propaganda, no matter how many lies and narratives they try to put out there about Michael Jordan, guys, it never changes, man. Because once again, you cannot tear down Michael Jordan through lies and narratives because Michael Jordan was never built up through lies and narratives, guys. Those are the facts, man. You guys know the deal, man. Let me know what you guys think, man, about this. Maybe where you were growing up, there were other guys' names thrown out with the greatest of all time. But I do not believe that anyone's been regarded like Michael Jordan has as the greatest of all time. I don't believe anyone before Michael Jordan was really regarded that heavily as the greatest of all time. Like I said, and even back in the day, it didn't have the NBA's history. It wasn't the same as Michael Jordan being called this in the 90s, guys. You guys know the deal, man. I'll catch you guys on the next one.